Lewis Monroe, aka A145, the map maker. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about my brand new Jassara map, which has been released free to the world as of 1 week ago. And just today, I just released a major update where I've increased all the font sizes. It's a lot more legible on the 8.5 by 11 free download. So I've been working on this for 3 weeks now. A lot of different factors came together to inspire me to start working on this new Jassara map. The main one probably was the crashing of the stock market, which has only continued since I started making this diagram. And now I'm not just making this diagram to feed on hopium or wishful thinking. I'm really making it because there's other information that came into my perception that really told me that there's actually a solution that's already very much in the making and pretty far along, so that when we see the stock market crashing, we don't necessarily need to panic about it, because I believe this is all part of the bigger plan, and that the stock market crashing is a necessary part of that plan. And if we as patriots, truthers, and light workers are positioned properly before this happens, then we will be the ones coming out on top of this on the other side of things. As bad as it may look right now, you know, in terms of cryptocurrencies, I really look at exactly how many coins I have, not necessarily what the price is today. And the lower it goes, the more you can buy. So keep buying that dip. But also a few other things that came into my knowledge that inspired me to create this diagram was a certain quantum financial system infographic that had been floating around on Telegram on channels like Whiplash and Quantum Stellar Initiative. So I found this diagram, and I really always felt that there was something very substantial to it. I hadn't really looked over the whole thing since I found it, but in the process of beginning this diagram, I printed out the QFS infographic for myself at a large scale and really read through the whole thing in great detail myself. And after having read that, I really realized that there really is a lot of development and infrastructure, legislation and such that's already in the works that really does seem like it's pointing in a specific direction, that there is a plan in place that's already really being carried out. I would say even at least 60% or more already carried out. And it's really only that 40% left to be determined, which is not set in stone. And so some of this information on the Jassara map is indeed speculation. However, you know, there's also the possibility of insider leaks, and where this QFS infographic really came from is something debatable. There is a name on the bottom right of it attributing it to someone specific. However, when I met Emily Tang the past weekend, she asked me, "Do you know where this graphic came from?" And I said, Lawrence on the bottom. And she said, "No, actually, this was leaked from the US military." And so if the US military is circulating some of this information that's really suggestive of a new financial system that is already in the works and on the way, then that again leads me to believe that there really is a plan in place. No need to panic over the market doing what it's doing at the moment. And I've also, through meeting Emily and hearing her speak about Whiplash and XX1133 on Twitter, it really seems like, I know Q has said no outside comms from Q, but considering Q is pretty much gone at this stage, you know, I think we have to assume that the white hats would in some form establish some other outside comms. And I believe that either Whiplash or Emily or X1133 or all of them may actually be, you know, somewhat of new forms of disclosure operations to give the patriots intel that they're not getting anywhere else, who are really interested in and following the narrative of the alliance and what they're planning to do for the financial system, for America, and for humanity. So I really do believe that some of this information legitimately is leaked insider intel, and that, you know, it's not just speculation by people on the internet. It is substantial. And of course, plans can always change. However, Jassara and the QFS is a plan that makes sense. It's realistic. There's a whole bunch of technological development behind it. And I really think that the people who are trying to steer this are going to do everything they can to make this plan happen. And another reason why I decided to make the JASARA map was because I believe that by bringing collective focus onto this plan and having more people understand it will be a way of manifesting it and making it into a reality. Now, before we really get into JASARA, I want to talk a little bit first about NESARA, the difference between the two essentially being that NESARA was the actual legislation proposed within the US government for a National Economic Security and Reformation Act. And supposedly they were planning to vote on this in 2000, and that 9/11 aborted it, and that a bunch of the gold that was going to be used for this plan was stolen from the World Trade Center. Hard to imagine George W. Bush planning to do anything good for the country, but this is what people say. Now, I learned quite a great deal about NESARA from a great documentary produced by James Rink almost 10 years ago called Change is on the Horizon, Dawn of the Golden Age, which I saw on YouTube a while back. And so that was my sort of base understanding of NESARA JASARA. And this NESARA story just goes way back. I mean, this is, we talked about this a lot in our JASARA video we did, but this documentary goes, all the way back through time. And what I say about NESARA in the JASARA map is that a tale was once told many ages ago of a time when there was abundance for all, and the labors of man were carried out with pleasure and in extravagant ways that exceeded the basic need for survival. As a spiritually directed financial program, NESARA traces back to the work of Saint Germain and 3 other ascended masters. That work began in the 15th century and was designed to provide a new economic system for the world during the present time of transition. When Saint Germain learned the alchemical arts and acquired the philosopher's stone, he saw a path to unlimited prosperity for mankind. But dark forces stood in his way, choosing instead to squander away all the world's wealth into their own coffers in a desperate bid to rule forever. Their last rodeo is now, for nothing can stop NESARA. And so James's documentary, Changes on the Horizon, goes through this whole long story leading up to the present of all the different times this legislation or this plan has tried to come forward and basically been sabotaged by the deep state. And a big part of that is this farmers' claims lawsuit that was going on for many, many years. I pretty much only mentioned this briefly on the NESARA map because there's so much more to explain, but that's a whole rabbit hole in and of itself. So JASARA is essentially the global version of the NESARA plan. My basic definition of JASARA and the JASARA map I've made is that JASARA is the Global Economic Security and Reformation Act, a plan for the quantum reset of our global financial system. This diagram blends real-world established facts, events, agencies, and legislation with theoretical or possibly insider-leaked plans to correct the critical financial problems our world faces, with the technology of blockchain and quantum computers, and the common sense of asset-backed currency. As more people come to understand how our previous financial system grifted the planet, they will, as a result, demand a new system that is transparent, free of corruption, efficient, safe, global, and digital. That system will be the QFS, and it will be established through JASARA. So one of the main features on the JASARA map is the list of articles of NESARA JASARA, which you can find on jasara.news. Now, I have no idea who made the website jasara.news. It looks very unofficial for being the official, global financial new economic plan. However, the whole site, jasara.news, is basically centered around a blog, which is amalgamating articles which describe real world instances where it really looks like this plan is coming into fruition. And so I definitely recommend you guys check out that blog and really look into some of these articles if you don't believe JASARA exists. If you're someone like Jordan Sather who's saying that the quantum financial system doesn't exist, we'll get to that in a minute. But to just dismiss this outright is complete lunacy, because there is so much development, especially in the quantum field, that indicates that not only is a change coming, but a change is absolutely mandatory. So to go quickly through the 20 articles of Jasara / Nesara, and now it doesn't really make sense because a lot of these pretty much just refer to the United States, but we're saying that this will be instituted globally. So I guess this is the articles of Nesara, which would then be adapted to also be the articles of Jasara, depending on what federal agencies exist in every different country of the world. Number 1. Cancels all credit card, mortgage, and other bank debt due to illegal banking and government activities. Many refer to this as a jubilee or complete forgiveness of debt. 2. Abolishes the income tax. 3. Abolishes the IRS, with employees of the IRS transferred into the U.S. Treasury National Sales Tax area. 4. Creates a 17% flat rate non-essential new items only sales tax revenue for the government. In other words, food, medicine will not be taxed, nor used items such as old homes. 5. Increases benefits to senior citizens. 6. Returns constitutional law to all courts and legal matters. 7. Reinstates the original Title of Nobility Act, which was to be the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. 8. Establishes new presidential and congressional elections within 120 days of Jasara's announcement. The interim government will cancel all national emergencies and return us back to constitutional law. Now, I would also imagine we would need to have new elections for pretty much all government positions, including mayors, governors, and even down to city council, because they have all been corrupted by deep state. 9. Monitors elections and prevents illegal election activities of special interest groups. This will be done through the quantum voting system, which is also part of the Nesara-Jasara plan. 10. Creates new U.S. Treasury rainbow currency backed by gold, silver, platinum, and other precious metals, ending the bankruptcy of the United States initiated by Franklin Roosevelt in 1933. 11. Forbids the sale of American birth certificate records as chattel property bonds by the U.S. Department of Transportation. That's a big one, guys. You can literally check your birth certificates and look in the bottom left corner, and it says it was issued by a bank. When I first saw that, I was like, wow, they're just trading us like property on the international market, and even off planet too, most likely. 12. Initiates new U.S. Treasury bank system in alignment with constitutional law. 13. Eliminates the Federal Reserve System. During the transition period, the Federal Reserve will be allowed to operate side by side of the U.S. Treasury for 1 year in order to remove all Federal Reserve notes from the money supply. Now, with regard to Article 13 of Nesara, remember back in March of 2020 when it was announced that through H.R. 748, the CARES Act passed by U.S. Congress and became public law. Within this act is said to have merged the Federal Reserve into the Treasury. Now, personally, I remembered this happening. I remember sharing it when it happened. When I went back to research this for this map to just double confirm it and find the articles, it really seemed like a lot of the articles had been swept from the internet. So did the Fed merge with the Treasury as of 3/27/2020? Was it ever removed from the Treasury? I'm not sure. There has been so many rumors about, the Fed being barricaded in DC, the Treasury being raided in DC. There is clearly something going on behind the scenes. And I know that this law was passed by Congress, that there was some shift between the Federal Reserve and the Treasury in 2020. Also, the day following that, Q posted saying the Patriots are now in control of the Federal Reserve. That was Q post 3904. So Article 13 of Jasara may have already come to pass. Now, we are now almost 2 years past that transition period. We have not necessarily seen the Federal Reserve notes decirculated yet, but it does seem that Article 13 of Nesara may have already happened in the United States and is currently being covered up in a way. 14. Restores financial privacy. 15. Retrains all judges and attorneys in constitutional law. 16. Ceases all aggressive U.S. government military actions worldwide. 17. Establishes peace throughout the world. 18. Releases unprecedented prosperity with enormous sums of money for humanitarian purposes. 19. Enables the public release of over 6,000 patents of suppressed technology that are being withheld from the public under the guise of national security, including free energy devices, anti-gravity, and sonic healing machines, also known as medbeds. 20. The quantum financial system, the quantum voting system, QVS, global currency reset, GCR, and the revaluation of currencies, the RV. So those are the articles, guys. And another really important diagram that I incorporated into the GESARA map was one of X1133's diagrams, which I would describe as the new quantum international financial structure with asset-backed digital currencies. Now, what this diagram was showing was that essentially we're going to have the same international financial institutions. However, all of them have now been reclaimed by the white hats, and they're going to be simultaneously moving all the different world currencies into asset-backed currencies, as the Russian ruble already has done this year, which is actually one of the major signs that this GESARA plan is in the beginning stages of playing out on the real world stage. The fact that Russia has already actually upheld their part of this plan to return to asset-backed currencies. One of the important things that this diagram was showing was that the old ISO standard for international money transfer, ISO TC 307, as well as the SWIFT system for money transfer internationally, are essentially being replaced. Now, we have already seen this happen as well in Russia, with all the different countries cutting them off from SWIFT like it was some kind of punishment. However, they already had their own national version of SWIFT ready to go. And we know from some insider leaks and also a lot of information in the cryptosphere that a lot of these international banks may already be using XRP to transfer money internationally, because it is the fastest, the cheapest, and the safest way to transfer money internationally at present. You know, it's a new technology using the blockchain, and it works better than SWIFT. And so SWIFT and the old ISO standards are going away, and ISO 20022 is the new format for transferring money internationally. Now, what is ISO 20022 exactly? Well, the International Standards Organization is what ISO stands for. And this is one of these, I mean, I guess you would call it globalist organizations, but to some degree, it's important to have, you know, global institutions to make things flow a little bit more smoothly over borders. You know, it would be nice if we could get the same electrical plug in every country, so you wouldn't have to keep switching your adapters. But, you know, for some things it really is necessary. And so this is an international standard for how we're going to be transferring money in the future with digital currency. Now, we could call that cryptocurrency, but it's really going to be more like digital asset-backed currency in the future. It's not going to lose that sort of, it's going to lose that shady crypto prefix when all of these Khazarian coins, as we call them, such as Bitcoin and Ethereum and many, many of the other ones, go to the wayside. So the ISO 20022 official definition is that it is a standard for electronic data interchange between financial institutions. It describes a common metadata language and model for financial messages sent across the world. And at present, the crypto coins that are ISO 20022 compliant are XRP, Stellar, Algorand, IOTA, and Zinfin. Now, the part of this map that is somewhat speculative but has been repeated ad nauseum by Whiplash and others in the sort of Q crypto sphere, who I have to say I suspect are likely to be speaking based on insider information coming from the US military and the Q team itself, is that these 5 digital assets are actually already backed by assets, backed by precious metal assets, with XRP being correlated to gold, Stellar Lumens being correlated to silver, Algo correlated to platinum, IOTA correlated to iridium, and Zinfin correlated to copper. There's a 6th one that's not released yet, which is the Flare Network and their token Songbird, which is said to be correlated with platinum. Now, I'm not sure if that's going to be Songbird officially or another token that the Flare Network's coming out with, but you know, the ISO 20022 coins will most likely be expanding And they're already expanding very dramatically, even within these networks I already mentioned, the XRP and the Stellar in particular. There is a Stellar wallet called Lobster, which within the Lobster wallet, you can access this whole ecosystem of coins, tokens, and essentially stocks within the Stellar network. Now, there is a lot of controversy and uncertainty as to whether a lot of these stocks are real or not. And the assets on the Lobster Stellar network are also being flooded by scammers who are trying to delegitimize the entire app and the entire network by putting out so many different scams. And so there is definitely a lot of cleanup that needs to happen. However, some of these assets within Lobster and on the Stellar network appear to be correlated with Russian banks, Chinese banks, many different precious metals and precious stones. And so essentially, what it looks like the white hats are trying to do with this Lobster app and the Stellar network is recreate the stock market on the Stellar network. Now, if Stellar is an asset controlled by white hats, this would make a lot of sense that since there is so much corruption in the actual stock market, corruption in hedge funds and companies like JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs. Best to just cut them out of the system completely, which is what it looks like they're trying to do with Lobster and the Stellar network. Now, I have information about each one of these networks and digital assets on the diagram, but a lot of it gets into sort of crypto jargon that I think most people wouldn't understand. However, I also have symbols here, which come from another XX1133 diagram that are essentially showing what each of these assets is created for. You know, every cryptocurrency or digital asset is created with an intention and a specific purpose. XRP being specifically made for monetary transfer from bank to bank, especially in high amounts, international banks that is. Stellar is more geared towards consumers and international commerce directly between consumers and businesses. Algorand is an ideal network for smart contracts. IOTA is ideal for machine-to-machine communication, and XinFin is ideal for international trade finance settlement. Getting into a little stuff that is above my knowledge level at the moment. However, I will also say that I had looked into all these different networks in the past year, a long time ago actually, and I have noticed between when I first investigated these back in about the fall and now that when you go to these different networks websites, there has been so much development, even just in the past 6 months. I mean, you can really tell that there is a whole lot of investment and work and development pouring into these projects. Many of these networks are also forming partnerships with other crypto exchanges, other real world companies. I have a diagram of XRP showing all the different companies that are either invested in or working with XRP. And it's just like, almost like the whole Fortune 500 is what it looks like. A lot of those companies are probably corrupt and will have to go anyway, but it's just clear that, you know, cryptocurrency and these specific digital assets are not just flash in the pans, that these are being used behind the scenes by big time corporations and big time banks. They're here to stay, they're not going away, and that this is the technology of the future. I have a little bit of information about blockchain itself on the Jassara map, which is really important to understand why we're moving to these digital currencies, why this technology is better than what we had before. I don't think I really need to explain why we won't be going back to trading gold coins like we did in the 700s, especially for international e-commerce. It makes absolutely no sense. A new system is needed, and a new system has been designed, and a lot of work has been put into it to bring it into fruition. Blockchain's definition is that it is a shared, immutable digital ledger that facilitates the process of recording transactions and tracking assets in a financial network. Some experts have described blockchain as a revolutionary technology that is going to have such a profound impact on the world that it can be compared to nothing other than the advent of the internet itself. Think about that for a minute. That's an important technology that's coming online right now that most people don't even know about yet, but is going to affect our whole world and be integrated into finance, into commerce, into identification, into so many different facets of our culture. The benefits of the blockchain are, number one, enhanced security. You have multiple records of the same document on different servers across the planet, and so it's much harder to steal, to forge, to do anything illegal because there's multiple records of the same information. 2, decentralization. 3, consensus. 4, transparency. 5, faster settlement. And 6, reduced cost. This is a revolutionary technology that who knows where it even came from. Maybe it was passed down to us from extraterrestrials, as so much of our most high-tech digital technology has been, from cell phones to radio to a lot of other things. Just on a little side note, there was a crop circle in 2020 that I always found very intriguing, and actually it looked like a symbol that I had channeled when asking the ETs for an anti-EMF sigil to use for Deep State Mapping project. So I just happened to put this crop circle, which I had already digitized previously, on the GESARA map in the center. And the more I looked at it, I realized that looking at this crop circle, it actually could be interpreted as expressing the idea of blockchain, because there is essentially, because you could see it as a rope chain around the hexagon border with blocks in the center. Blockchain. So I just kind of added it as a decoration on the GESARA map, and then I realized that this crop circle may actually be expressing the idea of a blockchain. So while we're on the topic of ET assistance, I should mention that ET assistance is on the map, and I think that this has been a big part of this QFS that is coming. And not only that, but the defeat of the Cabal and the Draco and the Anunnaki as well. I think the ETs have been helping at literally every level of this process. I think they even helped me telepathically with my diagrams, but they're helping us in the deep underground bases, they're helping us in space, and they're helping us set up this financial system. Integration into the interstellar community's payment systems is going to be an aspect of introducing the quantum financial system. It will facilitate off-planet travel as well as tourism. It will promote diversity, exoculture, and technological and spiritual advancement. Now, this is talking about the later stages of the introduction of the QFS and GESARA. However, never hurts to be prepared. There's also so many people talking about the potential for disclosure happening in the near future that I think all of this could actually coincide to create the perfect storm. Now, I definitely think that ET disclosure may come as sort of a later aspect of GESARA and the QFS, but it is a part of it. And of course, there's people who will probably never accept ET disclosure just because of their limited belief systems that they refuse to give up. So we'll just have to announce it and see how it goes. So continuing to work through the GESARA map in a sort of logical fashion, I'll talk a little bit about this section of bullet points and agencies here at the top. I would describe this as kind of like the space section because it's really all based around Space Force. It's showing that Space Force is working with SpaceX, owned by Elon Musk, who is also showing indications that he wants to help the White Hats with the retaking of social media, starting with Twitter. And that SpaceX is the developer of Starlink, which is the mega constellation of satellites launching more and more every month. It is said that the Starlink mega constellation will be instrumental in allowing the whole world to access the quantum financial system, making sure that no area, not even remote rural areas, are excluded from participating in the quantum financial system. It will also be able to ensure a more speedy rollout, not having to build expensive and slow infrastructure such as fiber optic wires out into all parts of the world, but will wirelessly integrate the whole world into the quantum financial system. Another somewhat classified project is called Project Odin, which is the plan, supposedly unconfirmed, to use Starlink to do the EBS system that we have all been waiting for since Q's earliest posts in 2017. As many of you probably already know, Space Force is the highest warfighting domain established by Donald J. Trump, and that it's responsible not only for space security, but cyber security. A lot of people say that Trump created Space Force to act as a way to disclose a lot of the technology that was being used by the secret space program. Of course, that is a whole other deep rabbit hole where different people will say that the secret space program has been developed to different extents. However, I don't think too many people would deny that some form of secret space program actually does exist. I put a kind of cool Star Trek icon on the GESARA map. Not sure if that's the actual technology they're using. It's often said in the ufology circles, the secret space program initially developed out of the Navy and submarine technology that was simply adapted for use in outer space. So essentially, submarines that were given anti-gravitic capabilities and simply floated from the ocean up into space was the beginning of the secret space program. Where it's gone since then is anyone's guess. So as the US Space Force will be disclosing some of the secret space program technologies, we expect this to sort of integrate with that national security patent release that is expected to happen with GESARA. There are so many patents, 6,000 plus it is said, amazing patents of futuristic technology that have been repressed, supposedly due to national security. These are what humanity really needs to get their hands on. Of course, another integral aspect of this whole plan is that America is currently in a continuity of government situation since the 2020 election. It was Trump's executive order 13848 issued on 9/12/2018, which declared that if there was foreign interference in a US election in the future, that there would be a report produced within 45 days of the election, and that there were contingencies in place to remedy the situation. Since obviously that happened in 2020, I do believe that we have gone into a continuity of government situation, which has been described by some in the Q community as devolution situation with the military, where POTUS is still the commander-in-chief of the highest levels of the military, including the Space Force, that he is essentially a wartime president living in exile, still commanding the highest level of the US military, Space Force, and the nuclear codes. Working with his Pleiadian wife, Melania, who may be Queen Diana, we're getting into a little bit past GESARA. Get back on track. So you'll notice the map in the middle of the GESARA map is the map of the world with these different sites labeled on 6 different continents. What these sites represent are the quantum computers on each continent, which will be running the quantum financial system. I've also labeled a couple other key locations: Thule Air Force Base, which is now Space Force Base in Greenland; Cayenne Mountain in Colorado, which is possibly where the real Donald Trump is residing, commanding all of this, commanding the highest levels of the US military while this Biden presidency is playing out. We do believe that there are multiple clones of Trump for security purposes, of course, and that the most important one is kept in a secure location, bunkered up, possibly. And then, of course, Mar-a-Lago, the Winter White House. You know, depending on security, maybe the real Trump can go to Mar-a-Lago, depending on how much of the cabal the White Hats have actually defeated at this stage. You know, I would hope he can go to Mar-a-Lago and not have to be bunkered up in Cayenne Mountain. But, you know, the supposedly real POTUS does seem like he does a lot of things which would be very dangerous for someone as important as him. I mean, all of these rallies with no bulletproof glass. I mean, they have security checks, but, you know, you got the most important person in the country and possibly the world walking around quite a bit, quite liberally. So I think it makes perfect sense that he would have multiple body doubles and the OG Trump is kept secure somewhere. Now, at the bottom of the map, we have the main players in the alliance. Of course, 45, Trump, DJT, our man. Putin from Russia. As we see, Russia is ahead of America in this whole process. They've gone gold-backed ruble. They've kicked out SWIFT, so they are on their way to GESARA. It looks like they're going to even get there faster than the USA, possibly. I think the USA is going to make a surprise comeback pretty soon here, but at this stage, they seem to be further along than us. President or Prime Minister Modi from India, also another key player. We all remember how close him and Trump were, and Trump was loved in India when he went there. But supposedly Modi is playing a very big role in this Jassara QFS, is what Emily Tang told me. Z from China. Many people have said that as the deep state and as communist as China is, that Z is actually working with the white hats and that he is working to excise the deep state and the Communist Party from China. That's a little bit of a controversial one, but that's what they say. And then, of course, Mohammed bin Salman from Saudi Arabia, a key ally to Trump in the alliance from the beginning. As we know, the whole Q operation started with the Saudi purge of princes, which was bin Salman's idea. Now, one other thing I'll say here is that Emily Tang told me that I should add Zelensky onto this alliance, which I was a little bit skeptical of. She was saying that Zelensky from Ukraine is actually a key player working with the alliance, which really surprised me since I always thought he was a deep state actor installed by Obama. However, I could see that during Trump's presidency, he sort of weaseled his way in there and made his own little alliance with this actor. What are actors known for better than switching roles? So perhaps Obama installed this guy as a puppet actor in Ukraine, and then Trump went in there and made his own deal with Zelensky to correct things. Now, I do still believe that there was a lot of deep state activity in Ukraine. However, maybe we do have an ally on the inside there that's sort of letting Putin do what he wants. Who knows to what degree the conflict between Ukraine and Russia is being staged and how much actual carnage and bloodshed is being allowed to take place. How much of it is deep state versus Russia? How much of it is actual Ukraine versus Russia? Perhaps Zelensky is working with the White Hats from Kiev, whereas the deep state and the Khazarian mafia is really what controls the Azov battalion. Whole other situation. So let's talk about this sort of bottom left quadrant of the Jassara map. This area really focuses on the quantum computing development in the United States. And a lot of this came from that quantum financial system infographic supposedly leaked from the military. So a lot of this got kicked off with HR 6227, the National Quantum Initiative Act, passed by Congress and made public law in 2018. This began a national research effort encompassing federal agencies, academic community, and industry leaders to advance quantum computing science in the United States and its application to finance, telecommunication, science, and national security. The White House Office of Science and Technology Policy is working with the National Quantum Coordination Office, who is working with NIST, the National Institute of the Standards of Technology, and also Donald J. Trump issued Executive Order 13885, which created the National Quantum Initiative Advisory Committee. I'm personally speculating that it is this National Quantum Advisory Committee created by Trump, which would probably most likely be responsible for creating the new quantum voting system if that was used in the 2020 election as an additional failsafe to monitor this election and catch the cheaters in the process, which I have added here under the quantum voting system. Cheaters expelled from office. There is also a Quantum Economic Development Consortium that is further working to develop quantum technology in the United States. Quantum computers are real, folks. They already exist, and there's only more of them coming on the horizon. Now, my Jassara map does not include it, but on the quantum financial system infographic, it lists out 8 quantum computers which already exist, including the D-Wave, Microsoft Azure, IBM Quantum, Atom by Atom, StrangeWorks, and more. Because these quantum computers already exist, it is possible for any of these quantum computers to hack into our current financial system and break the encryption that keeps all of our financial assets secure. As more and more people and companies gain access to quantum computers, that ability to break encrypted financial information will become more and more widespread. And this will necessitate us moving into a more secure financial system. So just by the fact of these quantum computers existing necessitates us moving into a quantum financial system. And what they are developing for the quantum financial system is quantum resistant algorithms that will be at least more difficult for quantum computers to break into other people's financial data. At the same time, our entire technology sector is working on developing more and more advanced forms of AI. And whether you like AI or not, it will be AI that is monitoring this financial system and preventing fraud and other forms of illegal activity. Quantum sentient AI will be monitoring all transactions in the quantum financial system in real time to detect and prevent fraud. Hopefully it will be good, happy, friendly quantum AI. Now we get to two very important points on the GESARA map. Dry as they may be, they are very important, which is Basel III and Bretton Woods III. Bretton Woods III is not an actual conference that has happened yet. However, it has been described by Zoltan Puzar from Credit Suisse, one of the most prestigious financial institutions in the world, as a new world monetary order centered around commodity-based currencies. And again, it would seem that the move of global finance into this new paradigm of commodity-based currencies has already been kicked off by Russia, returning to the gold-backed ruble in 2022. And it seems that only more and more countries will be following in Russia's footsteps in this move, and that plans have already been made to do so. Specifically, Trump's executive order, his most famous one, and the one that ended the original QWeb, Executive Order 13818 from 12/21/17, which was blocking and confiscating the property of persons involved in human rights abuse or corruption. Now, it is said that this executive order was what allowed the White Hats to freeze, confiscate, and reacquire for the American people and humanity so many of the assets of these deep staters who were all involved in corruption, human rights abuse, and human trafficking. They had also been hoarding all the wealth, so each one of them you catch is a huge sum of money deposited back into the White Hats and humanity's collective pool of funds. And it is said that this seized assets, including gold, are what is being used to create America's new asset-backed currencies. These are being called rainbow notes, and there are already designs leaked, I'm not sure if they're official or not, of these rainbow notes with JFK on the $20 bill. I actually do not believe that these are the official designs of what will be the new American currency. However, I do strongly believe that America is moving to an asset-backed currency and that we will no longer be using those Federal Reserve notes that we've been using since the creation of the Federal Reserve. With our new rainbow note currency, it is said that there will be serial numbers and GPS tracking assigned to all vaulted federal assets, which correspond to both the paper notes in circulation as well as the digital assets such as XRP and XLM. This is how both our paper notes and our digital currencies will be asset-backed and no longer just fiat monopoly money being pumped out by the Federal Reserve willy-nilly whenever they want to print another billion for themselves or another 2 billion for Ukraine. Next here on the GESARA map, we have the crash. I think we can all see it happening in real time. All they're saying on TV is, you think this is the bottom? You think this is the bottom? Guess what? It's probably not the bottom, because it really seems like this whole financial system is really ready to implode, and that this entire plan that I've been speaking about for the past hour will be what the White Hats have already figured out is how to correct this crash of the fiat system, which was always predestined to crash because they were using currencies that perpetually deflate. And so this crash was eventually inevitable. I'm sure you've heard X22 talk about this a million times in a million different videos. I believe that the entire system was actually designed to essentially transfer the wealth of humanity into the coffers of the elite. And it has done just that The 1% has just gotten more and more wealthy as the middle class is destroyed and everyone's assets are just drained by the system itself. Totally unfair. I graduated from college in 2007 only to have the market crash for the first time in 2008, just as I was starting my career. The system has to end soon. And of course, the elite and these globalist billionaires would like this whole process to end with them just being deified and having all the wealth of the whole world as everyone else is in complete poverty and has to succumb to some kind of communist system and be reliant on handouts and universal basic income to survive. However, I think that the White Hats have a different plan. I think that they have derailed the elite's plan to do that and instead brought charges against the elite for all the crimes they've committed, seized their assets, and are planning this new financial system to bring all of humanity into a golden age, not just the 1%. So following the crash and the phasing out of fiat currency, the introduction of the asset-backed rainbow currency will be the RV, which is the global currency revaluation. They'll be revaluing all of the currencies in all the countries of the world to even the global playing field between imperialist first world nations and disadvantaged and historically oppressed third world nations. Over time, all fiat currencies will be devalued, debt-ridden currencies will be eliminated, and they'll be replaced by asset-backed currencies, as Russia has already done. Now, many people in the Q and the Truth community have been preparing for this RV by accumulating national currencies which are currently at a very low value compared to the USD, with the hopes that once this RV happens, those currencies will become equal to the USD and therefore they will make a huge profit on the amount that they bought. I have not done any of this myself. However, it's not necessarily a bad idea. And this has happened before, where a national currency has gone up dramatically in price compared to the USD literally overnight, creating maybe not millionaires, but creating $50,000 out of just the change that some people may have had in their pocket. I've heard of one example of this happening in Kuwait around the time of the first Gulf War. So some of the currencies expected to have the highest yield revaluation after the RV are the Iraqi dinar, the Zimbabwe zim, the Irani rial, the Vietnamese dong, and the Indonesian rupiah. With all the different results expected to come out of this RV, all the different ways prosperity and abundance is going to be distributed to the world, I don't think you necessarily need to worry about pursuing every single one of these avenues of how to maximize your profits. However, if you're interested in profiting off of the national currency revaluation, I would recommend to use high caution about where to get these currencies. Of course, there might probably a lot of fake ones on eBay. Only get foreign currencies from certified vendors, and also understand that on a lot of these sites, they are selling the different national currencies for almost double of the current exchange rates. So you'll have to expect the exchange rate to at least double, if not 10x, in order to get your profit from that investment. Through Jassara, we will be returning sovereignty to the planet. As you may know, the Queen of England currently owns most of the planet, and that the USA may even still be somewhat of a feudal to England and the Bank of England, with all of our attorneys trained by the British Association. That will be coming to an end. There's also some talk of the potential of reclaiming our personal trust, that there are, in some deep part of the deep state government, a whole bunch of money assigned to each of us of our personal trust, what as cattle we are worth on the international market, which some in the sovereignty community say would potentially be able to be reclaimed by us. That's something I'm a little bit less confident on, but maybe something you could look into. I haven't heard of anyone reclaiming their trust and getting rich off of it, but hey, I do know that trusts are a very good idea of how to secure your wealth once you already have it, because that's what all the elites do. And what is to become of the old system, all these Khazars, Rothschilds, deep staters, globalists, Satanists, pedophiles, vampires, Knights of Malta, Vatican henchmen, Jesuits, Freemasons, child torturers, and corrupt politicians? Well, we leave that to, of course, Durham and RICO, the most massive racketeering, influenced, and corrupt organizations, investigation, and trials to ever take place. And it is said that a lot of these have already happened. A lot of the deep staters have already been sent to Gitmo, that there are stand-ins either controlled by the white hats or hidden elements of the deep state continuing the presence of these people in the media, possibly a lot of CGI being used as well, but that the battle is essentially already won, that the guilty have already been convicted, and that it is really only trying to bring the public up to speed, having to show them and not just tell them how terrible these celebrities and politicians that they were putting all of their adoration and trust into actually were. Because of course, as Morpheus told us, until you're unplugged from the Matrix, you're potentially an agent. So we have to bring the public up to speed to make them understand that this is the change that we want. You know, there's probably a lot of upper middle class, semi-elites who actually don't want the whole world to have prosperity, that like to feel like they're above people. So this is all part of the corruption that we have to end. Some of the things that will be ending: the Federal Reserve, the Rothschild banking dynasty down through the JP Morgans, Morgan Stanley, BlackRock, and all of the rest, all of the illegal money laundering, the usury, the Bitcoin and Ethereum, Khazarian cryptos, unreasonably high transaction fees, and the illegal trafficking of weapons, humans, and drugs. So guys, that is the GESARA map in a nutshell. In the way bottom right, I include some community education resources, some of which I've already mentioned. The documentary Changes on the Horizon by James Rink. The Telegram channel Whiplash, who is so controversial, so many people saying that he's promoting scam tokens. I don't know the guy personally. I cannot vouch whether his tokens that he promotes are scams or not, but I would say it's a good one to follow just for information, maybe not to invest in all the tokens. I personally believe that just investing in XRP and XLM would probably be enough. However, you know, if you want to explore some other assets, go ahead and do so. And, you know, I'm not sure about Lobster either, but I think it's a very interesting project going on. Unfortunately, it is plagued by scammers, but it's always something to learn more about and look into, you know, before you just write off new technology as a scam. You know, you might be passing up what may be the future of the stock market and potentially getting in on it at such an early stage. You know, this is how a lot of people got really rich off cryptocurrency, by investing in Bitcoin back in 2010, you know, when it was pennies on the dollar, and then it went up to 60,000 and they became, you know, billionaires. And so that's what Lobster potentially is, getting in on a market in the early stages, so that when it does mature, that your investments may, you know, 10 or 100x potentially. And so some people are investing in a lot of these assets on Lobster with just a few dollars. You know, if it's an asset that's worth, you know, 0.000 something, that if you just invest, you know, $1 or $2 or $10, that if that asset were to, you know, skyrocket over the course of even 5 years or so, that, you know, you could potentially come into quite a bit of dough. Quantum Stellar Initiative, another one on Telegram that's, I know Emily Tang personally now, and she personally knows Whiplash. And, you know, supposedly they are getting some of their information from insider US government or military sources. XX1133 and some other numbers on Twitter is responsible for either creating or sharing a lot of these different diagrams explaining the quantum financial system and the ISO 20022 coins to a wider audience. And then, of course, Deep State Mapping Project and Operation QAnon, essential in getting the word out. And one other one that I've just added to the flyer that is not on the poster is, of course, X22 Report, who I'm not sure why he promotes Bitcoin sometimes, but he definitely has the right idea on the geopolitical financial news, you know, and so he's been into finance for a very long time, even before Q, and definitely has predicted this crash. I'm not sure if he knows everything about the GESARA plans, but X22 is definitely on the Q team working with the white hats and putting out a lot of the good information most of the time. You know, I'm not going to say I trust any of these people with my private keys, but, you know, I think it is great that there are patriots in this movement that are helping Q get the message out, helping Trump get the message out, and making plans for this financial system to become a reality. And so, you know, I haven't had anyone accuse me yet of being a scammer or putting out hopium, hope porn with this GESARA map. But I think between all the different Trump executive orders that he's passed, between these different actual laws passed by our Congress, between all the development of quantum computers and the necessity for quantum resistant algorithms and a financial system that is safe in the quantum computer era, and the amazing advent of blockchain technology, which is going to revolutionize finance, communication, contract, commerce, in so many different areas of our world, that it is clear that something is on the way. Change is on the horizon, as James Rink would say. And whether you want to surf into that change in style or be a Luddite and just refuse to learn anything about the changes in technology and finance that are coming, that is up to you. But I recommend that you learn about it as much as you can and do what you think is safest with your precious hard-earned money. So guys, like I said in the beginning, the GESARA map is being gifted free to the world in accordance with the plan to release prosperity and abundance across the planet. I wouldn't have made this map if I didn't believe that this was not only possible, but actually happening, and it will only help as we manifest it and understand it. This is a small part of my own humanitarian contribution to the plan and the planet, helping the truthers, patriots, light workers better understand the new financial system so that when the QFS rolls out, conscious, deserving, and responsible individuals will be better positioned to use their newfound prosperity for the betterment of humanity. You're welcome. We know a financial reset has to come. It's only a question of who can best navigate it, and it's clearly not Let's Go Brandon. Fortunately, the Maestro and the Alliance have come up with the perfect plan, and that plan is GESARA. GESARA. If you like the free download, check out the poster on deepstateminingproject.com. I've just finalized the print version, so I'll be uploading the product of the print version very soon, which will be a laminate like this one. I definitely plan on making this into a tapestry, which I think will be awesome, and I even want to develop a t-shirt idea for it. I think will be really cool. So a lot more GESARA to come, keeping it high vibe, keeping it 5D. Just watching the stock market crash like we know what's going to happen next, and it's only good things for those of us in the know and those of us who are open and ready to accepting abundance. And once we do have that abundance, it's going to be about those humanitarian projects to bring the rest of the world up to the same level of prosperity. As Orit B. Codex would say, why can't the whole world look like Beverly Hills? Why can't the whole world look like a nice neighborhood and not have slums and not have drug addicts on the street and not have entire continents which are impoverished by organizations like the IMF? So hopefully the white hats have gotten into those Swiss organizations, because when I first saw that XX1133 chart with the BIS and the World Bank and the World Economic Forum, I was like, not exactly sure if that's the best idea. But at the end of the day, you know, these Swissies have got it real organized. Like, I don't think that we're just gonna, you know, kick all those Swiss organizations off the planet. I mean, they're kind of the most powerful. So it's more like infiltration instead of invasion on behalf of the white hats, that the white hats have had to infiltrate the World Economic Forum and all those Swiss international financial institutions in order to bring in this GESARA, this positive Great Reset, positive for humanity. Could something go wrong? It certainly could. It's a very complicated plan, and things always change. As I said in the beginning, I believe this plan is about 60% completed, and in that last 40%, we're going to see if things do change, if we encounter any unexpected turbulence. But if you understand the plan, you can be a part of the plan, and you can help the plan come to fruition. And that is what the GESARA map is all about. All right, guys, make sure to head on over to deepstatemappingproject.com. First, make sure you're signed up for the newsletter so you can hear about new artwork, video, expo announcements from us. Of course, then scroll on down to the flashing downloads GIF and make sure to get the free Jasara map download. Share it with your friends, print it out if you like. And then, of course, if you want to support the operation, check out all the different products we offer. Intel packets are most popular. Posters, t-shirts, flyers, prints, and of course a Palladian technology section where you can get light code stickers and alter objects. Great to put on water bottles to supercharge your water for the day. Get those downloads, those light codes streaming in. Maybe you'll get another map idea like me. Our Palladian discs are almost sold out, you guys. There's only a few left. Palladian discs have been a huge success. Much love to Sherry Lynn. We're working on ordering some more of them, just trying to decide which ones to order if we want to do any adjustments or improvements to what we were offering. And the new crystal section as well is pretty picked over, but there are still some of the best crystals remaining in there. You get your Sintamani stones and you get your Lemurian quartz dolphins from the DSMP crystal store. All right, guys, that's going to be it for this one. Sorry, I haven't been doing more videos recently, but I think you can tell that I've been very busy with the mapping and the Jasara researching. So I have a lot more video ideas on the waiting list, a lot more interviews I want to do, and of course, more videos with our Palladian ambassador, Bill Removed. So we'll be back very soon on the next video.